On the afternoon of January 29, 1921, Captain Thomas Jacobs of the Cape Lookout Lightship spotted a 5-masted schooner approaching from the south. For days, the lightship was battered with wind, rain, and fog, but now the weather was finally clearing, and the magnificent schooner was a welcome sight. Impressed by her beauty, the lightship's engineer, James Steele, took a photo as she drew closer. As the schooner sailed past at around 4 knots, a red-headed man called out from the ship using a megaphone. He said that they had lost both anchors in a gale off the frying pan Shoals and asked if the lightship could convey word to their owners. The man didn't look or act like a captain or an officer. Several men were milling around her quarterdeck, the space that was usually reserved for officers. All of it seemed very strange. Almost as soon as the schooner disappeared on the horizon, a steamer approached from the south. Captain Jacobs quickly raised the letters RQK to signal that they had an important message, but the steamer didn't slow down. The lightship let out 4 blasts from its steam whistle, another widely honored signal to establish contact. But immediately following the signal, the steamer changed course. At the same time, the men on board hastily covered the ship's nameplates with canvas and quickly steamed away. The schooner Captain Jacobs and his crew saw that day was the ill-fated Carroll A. a 5-masted schooner that would be discovered only a few days later on the Diamond Shoals completely abandoned, one of the most infamous ghost ships of all time. The mystery of what happened to her crew remains unsolved to this day. But a less-known aspect of the story is the identity of the strange steamer seen following the Deering. Some believe that the mystery ship was the ill-fated SS Hewitt, a 5,300-ton cargo ship that vanished from the same area at around the same time. Sometimes linked to the fabled Bermuda Triangle, the fate of the Hewitt and her 42 crew members is a mystery all but forgotten to the chaos of time. I'd like to take a quick second to talk about this video's sponsor, Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. Tacticus is an immersive turn-based tactical strategy game set in the eternal conflict of Game Workshop's Warhammer 40,000 universe. Fight against or strategize with other players in exciting high-stakes battles with an army of 70 legendary Warhammer 40,000 champions from 17 playable factions. The game challenges the player with fast-paced tactical battlefield gaming all in the palm of your hand. It's up to you to upgrade your champion, develop your strategy, and advance to victory. Snowprint Studios is always introducing fresh content, exciting features, new gameplay modes, and challenging events, so there's always something new. Tacticus is free to play, and with an average rating of 4.5 in the app stores, it's the go-to game for top-quality tactical gaming. Join a passionate community of gamers and Warhammer fans by downloading Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus today. Be sure to use the code NOVHELLO to claim 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstones, available until December 1st. Thank you again to Tacticus for sponsoring this video. Download the game, build your strategy, and win. And now, back to the SS Hewitt. Hans Jacob Hansen was one of the most experienced captains of the Union Sulphur Company. He first signed on with the fleet as a 3rd officer and spent years working up the ranks until he finally earned his master's license and took command of the company's most prized vessels. Throughout his long career, he battled every type of storm imaginable. From dense fog and howling winds to torrential rain, hurricanes, snow, and sleet, Captain Hansen survived it all. Through the darkest days of World War I, he managed to slip through minefields and evade German submarines. His navigation skills were unmatched, and he easily earned the admiration and respect of his crews. By 1921, Captain Hansen commanded the SS Hewitt, one of 2 nearly identical vessels built by the Four River Shipbuilding Company in Quincy, Massachusetts between 1913 and 1914. Originally named the Atlantic and the Pacific, the two ships were constructed for the J.S. Emery Steamship Company based in Boston for their Boston to Seattle route via the Panama Canal. They were designed by naval architect George Simpson to be as versatile and capable as possible, accommodating both bulk cargo and lumber. The ships measured 405.9 feet, or 123.4 meters in length, with a beam of 54.4 feet, or 16.6 meters, and each contained 3 90-foot long cargo holds. Each ship measured 5,399 gross registered tons. They were powered by 3 Scotch Marine boilers that fed steam to a triple expansion engine capable of generating 2,000 horsepower, achieving a service speed of around 12 knots from a single screw propeller. The Pacific was launched on August 4, 1914, and entered service in September. Neither ship remained with its original owner for long, and both were used to aid the Allied war effort during World War I. The Atlantic, renamed the Wilmore, was torpedoed and sunk in 1917. The Pacific was sold to the Union Sulphur Company and renamed the Hewitt in 1915. She underwent a minor refit and her home port was changed from Boston, Massachusetts to New York City. The Union Sulphur Company was founded in New Jersey in 1896 by inventor Herman Frasch. By World War I, the company was a major source of sulfur, a key ingredient to the Allied war effort. They relied on a growing fleet of bulk cargo carriers to transport sulfur up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States. The United States Navy requisitioned the Hewitt on August 9, 1917, and used her throughout the war to transport various war materials to ports in France. During her service, she was fitted with a 6-inch gun to defend against enemy U-boats, but she managed to avoid conflict during the war. On February 26, 1919, she was returned to the Union Sulphur Company, and she soon resumed carrying sulfur between Texas and Portland, Maine. In October 1920, she underwent a minor refit costing $100,000. After the overhaul, she was inspected and certified by the United States Steamboat Inspectors in Portland. By 1921, there was no reason to believe that the relatively new and well-maintained ship's career would end anytime soon. In late January 1921, the Hewitt took on a full load of around 8,000 tons of crude sulfur at the Union Sulphur Company's loading plant in Sabine Pass in Port Arthur, Texas. While she wasn't anything too impressive, the Hewitt was one of the largest bulk carriers built and operating in the United States at the time. She wasn't an old ship, but by this point in her career, this was a very familiar voyage for the vessel and her crew. She was scheduled to cross the Gulf of Mexico, round Florida, and then head north to drop off her cargo in Boston, Massachusetts, and Portland, Maine. Captain Hansen had been with the ship since the war, as had much of her crew. When they left Sabine on the afternoon of January 20th, 1921, there was no reason to believe that this voyage would be anything out of the ordinary. The Hewitt was equipped with a modern 2-kilowatt wireless set capable of transmitting messages to a radius of 300 miles. The equipment was housed in a wireless cabin in the ship's main superstructure. It was powered by the ship's main generator and supplemented with a storage battery capable of powering the equipment for hours if the ship's main power ever cut out. As mandated by the company, Captain Hansen sent daily wireless messages reporting the Hewitt's position. These updates were also used to report any issues with the ship, unusual weather, or anything else that might delay the ship's scheduled arrival in Boston on January 29th. Starting on January 21st, Captain Hansen diligently sent out these daily updates, reporting nothing out of the ordinary. In the coming days, the Hewitt crossed the Gulf of Mexico as planned. She then rounded the tip of Florida and headed north. On January 24th, Captain Hansen reported that they were 70 miles south of Jupiter, Florida. One day later, on January 25th, he reported that they were 222 miles north of Jupiter, indicating that they had traveled 292 nautical miles in 24 hours at a speed of around 12.16 knots, which was the Hewitt's typical cruising speed. No issues were reported, but the Hewitt was never heard from again. On the 26th, when Captain Hansen missed his daily update, Union Sulphur Company officials assumed that the ship's wireless equipment had failed. It wasn't until the ship failed to arrive as scheduled in Boston on the 29th that any alarm was raised. The company alerted the Coast Guard, and ships in the area were asked to search for the missing ship. Vessels in the Union Sulphur fleet sailed in zigzags over the area of the Hewitt's last reported position, but no trace of the ship or her 42 crew members was ever found. Then, only a few days later, a strange discovery on the Diamond Shoals stole attention away from the missing freighter. Early on the morning of January 31st, 1921, Surfman C.P. Brady of the Cape Hatteras Coast Guard Station spotted a large schooner at the edge of the Diamond Shoals. The 5-masted schooner was the Carroll A. Deering. They called out to signal those on board, but strangely received no reply. The phantom ship seemed to be abandoned. Bad weather prevented anyone from boarding the mystery ship until February 4th. They found her completely deserted. Despite multiple theories and extensive speculation, the fate of the Deering's crew has never been explained. She remains one of the most infamous ghost ships of all time. The derelict schooner was discovered only a few days after the Hewitt was reported missing from roughly the same area. This led some to speculate that the two strange occurrences might have been related. Some suggested that the Deering collided with the Hewitt. It was posited that the crew of the Deering was taken aboard the Hewitt, but the ship was more damaged than originally thought and eventually sank, taking both crews with her. But most consider this theory to be a major stretch, especially because the Deering showed no clear signs of damage from a collision with another ship. Only minor damage from running aground on the shoals. A vaguely more likely explanation is that the crew of the Deering abandoned their ship for another unknown reason and boarded the Hewitt before the steamer met some other unknown fate. But considering the state of the Deering when she was discovered, it's hard to imagine why her crew would have voluntarily abandoned her. It's also hard to believe that the Hewitt would take on the crew from another ship and never use their wireless set to report the incident. While it might be appealing to speculate about some connection between the two ships, there's no real reason to believe that they ever crossed paths. There was one man who survived the Hewitt. Bates Rainey signed on with the ship as a third engineer just before Christmas in 1920, while the ship was anchored at the main central dock in Portland. The 23-year-old Oklahoma City native joined the ship as she sailed for Sabine, Texas, a voyage that was by all accounts uneventful. On the morning of January 20th, 1921, as her crew prepared the ship for a return voyage to Maine, Rainey went to repair a broken ice machine. The moment he stepped into the room, he noticed the smell of cyanide of potassium fumes. He ran from the room, but he already inhaled too much of the noxious fumes from the broken machine. As he fled, he passed out and fell from the top grating of the ship's engine room onto the engine below. The fall severely injured his back. Just 20 minutes before the ill-fated ship pulled away from the pier, Rainey was taken off the ship and transported to the Lakeview Hospital in Port Arthur, where he would spend the next week recovering. When he was well enough to travel, he went to his father's home in Denver to recover. It was there that he got a call from a reporter for the Associated Press. That was how Rainey learned that the ship he should have been on that day had disappeared and was presumed lost. Rainey's injury was unrelated to the disappearance, but he was one of the only people still alive with first-hand knowledge of what happened on the Hewitt in the days before she vanished. While he couldn't be sure what happened to the ship he used to work on, he did remember one key detail. Shortly before he left the ship, he overheard a conversation between Captain Hansen and the Sabine harbor pilot. The pilot remarked, "Very heavily loaded, aren't you, Captain?" Hansen replied, "I know it. It's the company's orders, and I have to do it or I'll lose my job." At the mess table, he recalled officers joking about the overloaded ship. The third mate ominously joked, "We will all wake up someday and find ourselves floating in the Atlantic." Based on what he observed while he was on the ship, Rainey believed the habitual overloading had strained the ship's hull, and she suddenly broke in two, sinking quickly before anyone could launch a lifeboat or send out a distress call. While this theory is the most likely explanation, it is worth remembering that the Hewitt was built at a high standard and was refitted and certified only a few months before she went missing. Rainey's is just one of several theories that attempt to explain what happened to the Hewitt. Just after 2 a.m. on February 1st at the Absecon Light near Atlantic City, New Jersey, the quiet night was interrupted by a huge, vivid flash of light out at sea, followed by the sound of an explosion. Rocked by the sudden flood of light, surfman Norris Smith trained his night glass on the area of the explosion, but the sea went dark almost immediately, and he couldn't find the source of the blast. 20 miles to the north, a surfman at the Little Beach station witnessed the same explosion, as did the inlet patrol. The Coast Guard assumed that a ship exploded, and power boats were immediately sent to investigate the area. But no trace of wreckage was ever found. At dawn, Captain Allen of the Absecon station flew a Curtiss seaplane to search the area. They patrolled up and down for hours, but again, not a single piece of debris was found. The blast was immediately connected to the Hewitt and her potentially volatile sulfur cargo. The Coast Guard continued to search the area for traces of a blast or a missing ship, but nothing was ever found. Still, the sighting led many to believe that the Hewitt was taken down by an explosion. But the unexplained blast was seen almost a full week after the Hewitt stopped sending wireless messages, and if she maintained her intended schedule, she would have passed by the coast of New Jersey days before February 1st. One of the most popular explanations at the time, especially in the press, posited that the Hewitt and the Carroll A fell victim to piracy. 2 additional ships vanished from the area at around the same time, compounding the mystery. A message in a bottle was found from the Carroll A claiming that the ship was violently seized by pirates. Newspapers ran stories alleging that the disappearances were part of a Soviet plot to capture American ships. This was fueled by a growing Red Scare at the time. But the bottle message was soon found to be a hoax, and the missing vessels never turned up in any Soviet ports or anywhere else in the world. Some suggested that the Hewitt fell victim to a series of storms that passed through the area. But researchers have found that the Hewitt's course did not line up with the path or timing of the storms. There's also no explanation for why she wouldn't have sent out a distress signal or reported the worsening conditions. With so little to go on, some turn to the supernatural. Because of the Hewitt's path, she's sometimes included in the vaguely defined list of ships and planes lost to the Bermuda Triangle. But this connection does nothing to explain what actually happened to the Hewitt or any other ship lost in the area. Going to sea involves some degree of risk. While modern ships, even those built 100 years ago, were strong, reliable, and equipped with multiple safety features, accidents still happen. You don't need a supernatural explanation for the mundane failures of modern technology. When you go to sea, your ship is your entire world. We constantly underestimate the vastness of the world's oceans, and without modern technology, it's all too easy to fall into the abyss. The 42 men on the Hewitt were simply doing their jobs. They didn't anticipate that their world would fail them, dropping them into the chaotic and unforgiving sea, with no surviving narrative to comfort those on shore, into believing that their fate could have been reasoned with. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for supporting the video. Download the game for free using the link below. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.